Good morning. This video is dedicated to Maren and Louisa, to their families, and everyone who remembers them and loves them. It's my junkie shed where I kick it and try to play guitar. So those of you who do not know who Maren and Louisa are, shame on you, especially if you're white people. So there's a lot of stuff about racism going on in the news today, all over the world, the riots, everything about George Floyd. Well, I hate to burst your guys' little bubble. Police brutality has nothing to do with racism. And what they did to George Floyd is common arrest practices that them fucking pieces of shit pigs use all the time. 9 times out of 10, if you see someone even resistant verbally, they're going to be put down with the knee into the back and the neck. And if they run, 10 times out of 10, that's going to happen. Not only that, they're all going to dogpile on you and start beating you with their batons and stuff. And it doesn't matter what your color is. This happens to white people just as much as black people. The only reason police brutality seems worse in black neighborhoods because there's more crime there. And it's concentrated into a smaller area. It's just fucking common sense. Duh. Now, I'm not going to say there isn't racism against black people in this country, because obviously there is. And it's getting worse and worse now with these false narratives and all the anti-white racism that is the real issue. I know people that have never been racist in their whole life. They're starting to hate black people because Antifa's getting their wish now. And those of you black people like Tariq Nasheed and the other idiots, you're getting your wish. All the races are really starting to hate each other. It's funny because I'm a Nazi, but I love all races. Not equally, of course. I wouldn't be a Nazi if that was the case. I love my own first and foremost, but I love all races. I want all to prosper. And I think to do that, we must each look out for our own people without trying to hurt other people. That is the problem. Like Trump was talking about his trade negotiations with China sometimes last year, and all they could talk about was who was trying to fuck who the worst. As if that's good trade practices, instead of trying to find something mutually beneficial. So, the most prevalent type of racism in the whole world is anti-white racism, by far. Unquestionably. They just don't call it racism. They say, in fact, it can't be racism, when in fact, that's all it is. White Europeans are the most hated people by far than anyone else. And I have to let you in on a little secret. Half the shit we're hated for and blamed on us, we either didn't do, or it's been twisted around so much that we seem like we're the bad guys or whatever. But I'll tell you this right now. 99% of the slave ships during the transatlantic slave trade that docked here in America were owned by people of Jewish descent. Just like De Beers and most of the diamond and gold mines in Africa, and the controlling interests of the East and West Indian companies, and the list goes on and on and on. The conquistadors were, many of whom were Jews that had just converted to Catholicism at the deadline of the Inquisition, which happened to be the day Christopher Columbus set sail. The list goes on and on and on. And I know another thing. People say it's a myth about black people catching black people for the slave traders. How in the fuck else do you think they got captured? A ship's crew wasn't going to get off their ship and go chasing around a bunch of black people that were already faster than them to begin with. When the ship's crew was unhealthy with scurvy, many of them slaves themselves. Tricking them into getting on the ship like they did the Polynesians is only going to work once or twice. The reason it worked on the Polynesians is because they were separated by vast amounts of ocean. And the word didn't have a chance to go ahead of Captain Cook or whoever it was doing that. So somebody had to be capturing them people, and it wasn't just Arabs. The settlers that moved there, it wasn't them either, because they wanted to get along with their neighbors. The Boer, they got along fine with the Khoisan. It was the Zulu, whose lands they're not, that they had problems with, and still do. The king of the Khoisan says that Cape Town and all the areas around that, that's Boer land, fairly and squarely. But it never was the colonizers that were the problem in colonialization. It was the resource parasites, the moneylenders, the central bankers, in the form that they were back then. So not only did white Europeans have the least to do with the capturing of black people for slavery, and even though the most hated subject of slavery is probably the ownership of slaves by white Europeans here in America, which I think it was only something like 2% of the population. I'm not sure. It wasn't that many of the people that moved here. So even blaming us for that is kind of crazy, because chances are many of our ancestors never owned a slave in our entire history. And all this shit about the Vikings taking slaves, that wasn't until they started interacting with the other cultures around the Mediterranean, like the Romans and the Greeks, the Egyptians, and after that the Arabs and the Byzantiums. And they started realizing they can make a profit by capturing Slavic people on their ways to the Mediterranean Sea, when they're traveling down the rivers like the Dnieper and the Volga and the Danube, and well, you see what I'm saying. And that kind of slavery is exactly what the Africans were doing, because just as much as Germanic and Slavic people are separated by nothing really, a language, a little bit of DNA, tiny bit. That's how it is in Africa, except Africa, it has even more diversity. It's the most diverse place on the planet, as far as that side of our ancestry goes. So, the ancient Germanics didn't take slaves for a slave trade. They would take all their captives home with them as slaves to begin with, and then the men would be sacrificed almost to a man. The ones that were sissy men, they would be kept as slaves, because they figured that's what they were, since they were sissies. They wouldn't fight to the death. The women were normally installed as wives of concubines and loved and honored, just as the children were adopted. So in all reality, my people spent less time and less effort and had less involvement in the slave trade than any other people on this planet. And the people who are supposed to be the worst victims are actually the ones who engaged in it the longest because of their neighbors to the north, like Egypt. It was Egypt who bought the slaves, but it was the Nubians and other black Africans that captured their enemies and took them to the Egyptians as captives. Just like they did to the Arabs during the transatlantic slave trade and before that. Which, by the way, the Arab slave trade lasted for like 1,000 years compared to the transatlantic slave trade that was a couple hundred. The Arab slave trade was 100 times as large. No one hardly ever talks about it because there's not many black Arabs today or slave descendants, because the fact was the Arabs castrated their male slaves, so they didn't pass their genes on. And here in America, as cruel as the breeding or eugenics program was, it really made the people that were here into stronger people and a lot better looking people too, because they're all at least 25% European. And this will sound really racist, but a lot of those black Africans in Africa, they are nothing like the ones here today in America. But that just could be their hard living or whatever. The Mayans down in the rainforest in South America don't look very attractive either. But the black Americans, they look completely different. And America has the most numerous population of black Africans than any other country in the world besides Africa. I mean, any other continent besides Africa itself. That's a positive, I'd say. And the last thing about all this, really, when it came down for slavery to be ended, the only people who were pushing for it to be ended were white Europeans. In fact, the most whitest of Europeans, the Slavic, Germanic, and Celtic ones. And when the Finnish and the Baltic and all the northern, western, and eastern Europeans were fighting against slavery for a couple hundred years. 100 years before the Civil War that started in Europe. Because England and France and Russia and a few other countries decided that slavery was evil and that the world shouldn't have it anymore. And this was the only time this has ever happened in all of human history, to where there was a crusade against slavery for pure moral and ethical reasons. And the people who did it were the most pale cracker ass cave demon motherfuckers on the planet. The ones that are hated the most by everyone else. Imagine that. This is the true story. Read your history if you don't believe me. Don't listen to other people. Don't listen to me. Research what I'm saying. This war lasted over 100 years. Hundreds of thousands of Europeans lost their lives. The Barbary pirate wars and the Civil War were just battles in the war. They're just different engagements. Just like the both world wars are the same war too. In the end, the North, West, and Eastern Europeans fought against basically the rest of the whole world, including the Southern Europeans, the Southern Americans, or the Southern United States, or colonies, all of Latin America and South America, all of Arabia, basically, all of the Levant, Mesopotamia, many places in Asia, and every part of Africa that wasn't being colonialized by a European power, besides the Spanish, of course, and things like people like that, the Portuguese. The country that fought the hardest for slavery, or the nation, the territories that fought the hardest, actually were the ones in Africa. Because their whole way of life was dependent upon the slave trade, not just for the slaves, but to transfer all their goods. It moved all their trade around. Their whole civilization was basically designed around this trade. And it had been this way for thousands of years now. So when it was ended, for the most part, that's when Africa collapsed into the abject hunger and starvation that you've seen for the majority of the 1900s, where there's vultures following around little babies waiting for them to die so they could eat them. That was caused because of the economic collapse in Africa after the slave trade was ended. Ironically, the countries that prospered during this time were the ones that had the most heavy European colonialization, like Zimbabwe and South Africa, for one, or two. So basically, the whole narrative about white people is absolutely fucking false. In fact, we've done more good things for this world than any other race has. By far. By far. We've done a lot of bad things too. I'm not going to say we didn't. But we haven't done as many bad things as other people. Well, some we have, I'd say. Because there's more of us, or at least our influence covered a bigger area, like globally. That's why it's an absolute fact that the modern world, the Industrial Revolution, the Age of Information, the Space Age, the Atomic Age, all them things, modern medicine, modern government, all those things. I know there's contributions from other people, but the majority of it, the lion's share, came from my people. This is all the inventions, technology, everything. But we're so bad, you know? So, rest in peace, George Floyd. That's really, really terrible what happened to you, my friend. And I don't care what your criminal record was or whatever. That's a fucking bullshit reason to try to justify someone being killed. Or trying to just write it off as a nothing. As Candace Owens does, which I generally don't like to say nothing bad about Candace, because she's about the most beautiful woman in the world, inside and out, that I just love to spend the rest of my life with, even though I'm a Nazi. Imagine the kids we'd have, huh? The conversations we'd have. But she is beautiful inside and out. I love that woman. Yeah, Nazis aren't really racist. So, when a black man gets killed by a cop, even if he pulled a gun on the cop or something, but in my opinion, a cop shouldn't even be able to defend himself then. He put himself there. The person that is so-called breaking laws or whatever, maybe he don't believe those laws should be there. At least some of the laws. Maybe he thinks he's doing what is right, especially in cases like drug possession and such, where the fucking government, Big Brother, all them people, they don't have a fucking right to say anything about anything in anyone's lives, as long as they ain't giving the shit to little kids or causing crime because of it. And it ain't the drugs that cause the crime, it's the drug laws that do. That'd be a whole nother video, though. The cops should not have the right to shoot anybody unless that person is threatening someone innocent, as in civilian or other non-cop person. The cop put himself there to antagonize whoever he thinks he's going to arrest. And by the way, when you arrest someone, that by definition, that's kidnapping them. So any lesser offense than kidnapping that cop is arresting that person for, that means the cop is doing something worse. You understand the logic there, right? It don't matter if the legislator said, oh, this is the law, you can kidnap these people for... No, I don't give a fuck. That's not right. You're not going to kidnap someone for jaywalking or... You understand what I mean? So, the cop puts himself there to pull people over and tell them what to do. See, they're this public servant, but if you notice, all they do is order us around. Who in the fuck do they think they are? That's funny. They don't have the right to do any of that shit. They're just supposed to try to protect people and preserve peace. They're not there to punish people. They're not there to investigate people. None of that shit. Yet now they're so highly militarized, they think they're fucking God. That's one way that this anti-cop shit is a good thing. Which, if the cops were righteous, it'd be different. But they're not. Most of them are pieces of shit. No, I don't mean that. There's a lot of them that are pieces of shit, but the way the whole system's organized and the way they act, it makes them into pieces of shit. Because they're being taught that they could do what they're doing. They have forgotten what public servant means. And that is why they are so brutal to people. And it's not even a thing about race. Cops are bigoted to non-cops, whether you're white or black. And every time a black man gets killed and they want to turn it into a racial thing, they're causing that many more whites to become racist in truth. To all the people that are actually just looting and burning shit down, it's insane. It's like, how stupid are you fucking liberals to actually believe the shit you believe? How fucking stupid are you? It's amazing. But the conservatives are just as fucking stupid, because even though most of what they say is true and a lot of it's right, they're the ones that were fucking hornswoggled right from the very beginning, because they're fucking ankle deep in the pockets of every fucking Jewish banker upon this planet. While the Bolshevik communist Jews, which, by the way, the Bolsheviks, their leadership was mostly Jewish, just like the Young Turks, were Jews that converted to Islam, just like Sabbatai Sefi did, who was the mentor of his disciple, Jacob Frank. Them two founded the Sabbatean Frankists, a secret society of Kabbalists, basically, who created a new religion, as Sabbatai Sefi was labeled the Messiah in 1666. They had over 1 million Jews following the movement for a while, until he got captured by the Caliph of Turkey, of the Ottoman Empire, and forced to convert to Islam, which, why would a Jew have any problem doing that? It's the same God. It's the same religion. Islam and Christianity is just Judaism. Fucking duh. It's the same religion. That's why Jews have no problem converting. It's only the Christians and the Muslims that have the problem, because they're the ones that have the piss poison in their message. That message about this is the only word of God and all others are false and you're going to go to hell and the devil wants you and all that shit. That's the poison in the religions that has caused more deaths than anything except politics, like Marxism and shit. Which, by the way, the Jews created that. Karl Marx was a Jew. Oh, wait, the Jews didn't create that. Excuse my language. The people who created them was a Jewish heritage. I'm not anti-Semitic at all, by the way, and I am a Nazi. In fact, there's some Jews that just about every movie star that I like the most are Jewish. Like Wonder Woman and, God. The Avenger girl. Fuck, I don't know why I can't think of her name. I want to say Anastasia Romanoff, but that was a real person. So, Sabbatai Sefi's disciple's name was Jacob Frank, and they created the Sabbatean Frankist. Their disciples, two of them had the names of Karl Marx and Mayer Ansel Rothschild. That ring any bells to you? Doesn't it seem kind of funny that it was New York bankers such as the J.P. Morgan and rich people like the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Bank of England, the Rothschilds that were funding Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks? Which Vladimir Lenin was a Jew, by the way. Leon Trotsky was a Jew. Joseph Stalin had a Jewish wife. The royal family of England is owned by the Rothschild family. Completely. Now, the millions of Jews who died in World War II, or the 1.8 million, I think is official death toll now, they were the innocent ones that had nothing to do with banking or communism. Well, some of them probably were communist revolutionaries, because that was the whole point of putting the Jews into concentration camps. That had been going on since before World War II even started, because they kept trying to start revolution and insurgency, and assassination attempts kept happening against Hitler and other Nazi party members, and it was mostly Jewish people doing it. That's why they got put in prison. They were terrorists. All the bankers got exiled, and Germany switched from using central banking currency, such as every fucking planet, or every country on the planet just about nowadays uses, and started using their own form of currency, which was based off of units of work or hours of work performed. So it coincided exactly with your number of hours that you're getting paid for that day. When the Nazis did this, their economy went from last out of all Western nations to number one in the world in less than a year. That's something completely unprecedented in all of human history. And by the way, the Great Depression started in Germany. And while the rest of the world was still in depression, Germany became the most wealthy nation in the world. So, the bottom line is this. Every time a black man is killed by a cop, they want to turn it into a thing about race and start hating white people. Well, even if it was racism, in all the racism there is, all the white people killing blacks, whatever. As of right now, until something happens, I don't give a fuck about who dies anywhere until the world acknowledges and remembers Maren and Louisa. Until then, nobody got shit coming about victimhood or none of that bullshit. And if I ever hear a conservative say that Maren and Louisa oh God, it upsets me. If they say they were looking for more multiculturalism or whatever and they got it, if I ever hear someone say that to my face or in my presence, I'm gonna fucking beat them to death. I promise you that. They suffered the most horrible death ever suffered by anyone in all history. Raped and tortured for hours, decapitated, the dull butter knife, while conscious and aware. It was all videotaped, sent to their mothers. It's the worst thing to ever happen to anyone in all of history. And until the world remembers Maren and Louisa, fuck any other victim, and anyone who don't like my message can go fuck theirself. Period. I love you, and I am dedicated to you for the rest of my life and all of eternity. I'll protect you this time. God and Goddess bless you all. Remember Maren and Louisa.